The CEO falls for the cold, stunning beauty. One night of passion isn't enough. He's obsessed. Hello, YouTube family. I hope you're all doing well, and I pray from the bottom of my heart that wherever you're listening from, may life never bring you any troubles. May your faces always shine with smiles and happiness. I sincerely wish that success and joy follow you throughout your life. I also want to share something from my heart. I've noticed how much love you show through your comments and how much you enjoy the stories I share. It fills my heart with joy and motivates me to write even more passionately for all of you. But sometimes I feel a little sad because, although you enjoy the stories and leave kind comments, many of you forget to subscribe. It means the world to me when you do. So, I humbly request that you please subscribe to the channel and become an essential part of our beautiful family. Your support is everything to me. Now, without further delay, let's start today's story. The opulence of the Lancaster Gala was nothing short of breathtaking. It was an annual event where the elite gathered, dressed in their finest, cloaked in wealth and power. The grand ballroom shimmered with golden chandeliers, casting a warm glow over the perfectly polished marble floors. Waiters dressed in crisp black and white uniforms moved with precision, offering champagne in crystal flutes. The scent of expensive perfume and aged whiskey filled the air, mingling with the hushed whispers of business deals and scandalous affairs. Damien Lancaster stood at the heart of it all, a man who commanded attention without uttering a single word. With sharp features, piercing emerald eyes, and an aura of pure dominance, he was the kind of man who made women weak in the knees and men respect him, even in silence. The tailored Armani suit molded perfectly to his tall, chiseled frame, exuding raw power. He was a name whispered in fear in boardrooms, a billionaire who built his empire from nothing and crushed anyone who dared stand in his way. He was ruthless, calculated, untouchable. But even a man like him had moments of boredom. These events, though necessary, were predictable. The same faces, the same shallow conversations, the same desperate social climbers trying to gain his attention. He played along, nodding at business acquaintances, indulging in casual discussions about market trends and upcoming mergers. Yet nothing truly interested him, until his gaze landed on her. Celeste Aragon. She stood by the large floor-to-ceiling windows, her posture elegant yet detached, her gaze focused on the city lights beyond the glass. She was dressed in an ice-blue gown, a masterpiece of silk that clung to her slender figure, yet remained ethereal, as if she were untouchable. Her midnight black hair cascaded down her back in soft waves, framing a face that was almost too perfect to be real. High cheekbones, full lips painted the color of deep wine, and eyes like shards of the purest sapphire. She wasn't just beautiful, she was exquisite. And yet, there was something else, something even more captivating than her beauty. She was cold, untouchable, distant. Unlike the women who threw themselves at him, Celeste Aragon was ice, and that made her dangerous. Damien's lips curved into the faintest smirk. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him: money, power, influence. Celeste, however, radiated an energy that spoke of indifference. She did not seem impressed by the lavish surroundings or the men vying for her attention. It was rare. It was infuriating. It was fascinating. Without hesitation, he crossed the room, his movements deliberate and confident. Heads turned as he passed, whispers trailing behind him, but he paid no mind. His focus was singular. As he approached, he saw the way her delicate fingers wrapped around the stem of her champagne glass, how her eyes remained fixed on the skyline, as if the city held secrets only she could understand. "I don't believe we've met," he said, his voice smooth, deep, laced with authority. Celeste turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. If she was surprised to see the Damien Lancaster standing before her, she didn't show it. Instead, her sapphire eyes met his with a calm, assessing gaze, as if he were just another face in the crowd. "I know who you are, Mr. Lancaster," she replied coolly, her voice like velvet over ice. "Everyone here does." He arched a brow at her tone. There was no awe, no flattery, no feigned admiration. She wasn't trying to impress him, and that intrigued him even more. "And you are?" he prompted, though he already knew. He had heard of Celeste Aragon, the elusive businesswoman with a mind sharper than steel and a reputation just as ruthless as his own. She was an enigma in a world of predictable people. Celeste Aragon. She took a sip of her champagne, her expression giving nothing away. Damien let the name settle between them, watching her carefully. "Ah, the Ice Queen," he mused, the corner of his lips lifting slightly. "I've heard about you." She didn't react, didn't blush or flutter under his gaze like most women did. Instead, she tilted her head ever so slightly, as if she found him vaguely amusing. "And what is it they say about me?" "That you don't play games," he answered, his voice dipping lower. "That you're cold, untouchable, and impossible to impress." A shadow of a smile ghosted across her lips, but it was fleeting. "Then you should know, Mr. Lancaster, that your usual charm won't work on me." He chuckled, a rich, deep sound that made the air between them crackle. "Is that so?" She simply took another sip of her champagne, her eyes unwavering. "Yes, and I don't fall for men like you." The challenge in her voice sent a thrill through him. It had been years, years, since someone had dared to speak to him this way. Most people grovelled or tried to impress him. Celeste, however, seemed utterly unimpressed. Damien took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, but she didn't flinch. "Are you always this cold, or am I just special?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I don't waste warmth on men who think they can own me." His eyes darkened slightly, the amusement in them shifting into something more intense. "Ownership isn't what I'm after, Celeste." He let her name roll off his tongue, testing how it felt. "I prefer obsession." For the first time, something flickered in her gaze, something unreadable, something dangerous. But before he could decipher it, she turned her attention back to the city skyline. "Obsession is a dangerous thing, Mr. Lancaster," she murmured. "It rarely ends well." Damien watched her, intrigued beyond reason. He had come to this event expecting another predictable night, another empty conversation. Instead, he had found her, a woman who didn't cower, who didn't melt under his gaze, who remained as cold as ever despite the fire sparking between them. And for the first time in his life, Damien Lancaster felt something unexpected. He wanted more. Celeste Aragon was a puzzle, a mystery he was suddenly desperate to solve. She was unlike any woman he had ever met, and for a man who always got what he wanted, there was no question about it. He would have her, one way or another. The night was painted in shades of gold and midnight blue, the city skyline stretching infinitely beyond the grand penthouse windows. The soft glow of candles flickered across the spacious room, casting long, tantalizing shadows on the marble floors. The scent of aged wine and something unspoken, desire, anticipation, hung in the air, thick enough to steal breath. It had started as an evening of carefully maintained distance. Two powerful forces orbiting each other with an unspoken challenge, neither willing to yield, but somewhere between the clinking of glasses and the weight of their gazes locked in silent warfare, the inevitable happened. Celeste Aragon had spent years mastering the art of control. She had built walls so high and so impenetrable that no man had ever scaled them. And yet tonight, under the intoxicating spell of Damien Lancaster's relentless pursuit, his low, velvety voice coaxing her into surrender, those walls crumbled like dust. She told herself it was the wine, the charged tension between them, the way he had looked at her all night as though she were the only thing in existence. She told herself it was nothing more than a moment of indulgence, but deep down she knew. She had been fighting a losing battle from the start. The moment his lips touched hers, the world outside ceased to exist. His kiss wasn't hesitant or questioning. It was a claim, a fierce possession that set fire to everything she thought she knew about herself. He tasted of whiskey and control, of a man who knew what he wanted and never accepted anything less. Celeste had expected dominance, had prepared herself for it, but what she hadn't expected was the tenderness beneath it, the way his fingers trembled slightly as they traced her jawline, the way his lips softened against hers as though memorizing the shape of her, branding her with something deeper than just desire. Her mind screamed at her to stop, to retreat before it was too late, but her body, it betrayed her with a hunger she had never known. Damien was fire, consuming, scorching, demanding. He moved against her with an urgency that left her breathless, yet he never rushed, never took more than she was willing to give. He read every hesitation in her, every flicker of resistance, and met it with a patience that unraveled her completely. His hands traced the length of her back, slow and deliberate, as though she were something precious, as though he weren't just a man wanting a night, but a man memorizing her for eternity. It terrified her, but it was too late to turn back. They lost themselves in each other, tangled in silk sheets and whispered confessions neither dared to speak aloud in the daylight. The night stretched endlessly, filled with stolen kisses, gasped names, and a hunger that could never be fully sated. Damien worshipped her, not just with his hands and lips, but with the way he looked at her, like she was the only thing that had ever mattered. And for the first time in her life, Celeste allowed herself to believe in the illusion, just for this one night. But morning always came, cruel and unrelenting. The first rays of dawn crept through the sheer curtains, casting golden light over Damien's sleeping form. He lay beside her, one arm draped possessively across her waist, his face softened in sleep. He looked nothing like the ruthless billionaire the world feared. Here, he was just a man, beautiful, vulnerable, unknowingly dangerous to her heart. Celeste traced the sharp lines of his face with her eyes, committing every detail to memory. The way his dark lashes fanned over his cheeks, the way his lips parted slightly as he breathed. She had never allowed herself to be this close to anyone, had never let herself want like this. But it wasn't real. It couldn't be real, because men like Damien Lancaster didn't fall for women like her, and women like her didn't survive men like him. With a quiet breath, she slipped from the bed, moving like a ghost as she dressed. She ignored the sting in her chest, the ache that whispered for her to stay. Her hands trembled as she picked up the notepad from the bedside table, the words forming before she could stop them. She placed the note beside him, her fingers lingering for the briefest moment before she forced herself to turn away. She couldn't afford to look back, not now, not ever. As she stepped out into the morning light, a single thought haunted her. She had walked away first, but something in her heart whispered. Damien Lancaster would never let her go so easily. The moment Damien Lancaster opened his eyes to the empty space beside him, a cold realization settled deep in his chest. Celeste was gone. The sheets where she had lain were smooth, as if she had never been there at all, as if the night they shared had been nothing more than a fevered dream. But it wasn't a dream. The scent of her still lingered on his skin, the ghost of her touch still burned into him, and the memory of her soft moans still echoed in his mind. He had held her, kissed her, worshipped her. She had surrendered to him, let down the icy walls she had so carefully built, and for once he had seen her, the woman behind the mask. But instead of facing what they had ignited, she had disappeared. With a slow, measured breath, Damien pushed himself up, his muscles tightening with restrained fury. His gaze dropped to the nightstand where a neatly folded note rested, the words written in delicate, slanted handwriting. He reached for it, unfolding the small slip of paper, his jaw locking as his eyes skimmed over the cruelly simple message. Forget this ever happened. His fingers clenched around the note, crumpling the paper into a tight fist. Forget. Forget. Did she think he was a man who simply let things go? That he could erase the feel of her from his mind? That he could pretend she hadn't left a mark on him deeper than any woman before her? His lips curled into a dangerous smirk, but his eyes burned with something far darker. Obsession. She was running, and that only made him want her more. Damien Lancaster had spent his entire life controlling everything in his world. From business empires to the people who dared challenge him, he always got what he wanted. No one ever denied him, no one ever walked away from him, and certainly not a woman who had melted beneath his touch only hours ago. Celeste Aragon had no idea what she had just done. She had awakened something in him, something unrelenting, something possessive, something that would not rest until she was back where she belonged. With him, he swung his legs over the edge of the bed, the silk sheets pooling around his waist as he reached for his phone. The moment he unlocked it, he was already giving orders. "I want a full search. I don't care what it takes." His voice was ice, cutting through the morning silence like a blade. "Find her, now!" His security team was the best in the world, trained to track, to hunt, to locate anyone, anywhere. Within minutes, reports were coming in. Surveillance footage from the hotel showed Celeste slipping out in the early hours, wrapped in nothing but a trench coat over her dress from the night before. A car had picked her up, unregistered, untraceable. No credit card transactions, no flight records, no sign of where she had gone. She had vanished. Damien's grip on his phone tightened, his jaw clenching as frustration surged through him. Clever. She had planned this. She had known exactly what she was doing when she walked away. But did she really think she could disappear from him? "Expand the search," he commanded, his voice dangerously low. "I want eyes on every major transport hub. If she's still in the city, I'll know. And if she's not, then I want a list of possibilities." His men scrambled to obey, but even as they moved, a small part of him knew Celeste wasn't going to be that easy to find. She had been careful, too careful, and that only fueled his obsession more. A woman who could slip away like a ghost, who had the strength to walk away from him. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, and he needed her. Hours turned into days. He threw himself into work, but it was a futile distraction. Every meeting, every deal, every conversation was laced with the thought of her. Where was she? Was she thinking about him the way he was thinking about her? Did she miss him? Did she regret running? Number Celeste Aragon didn't regret. She was stubborn, infuriatingly so. She had left because she was afraid. Afraid of what she felt. Afraid of what he made her feel. He had seen it in her eyes that night. Beneath the cold exterior, beneath the layers of control, she had burned for him, and she hated that loss of control, but she wouldn't be able to resist him forever. By the end of the first week, his frustration reached its peak. His team had exhausted every possible lead, yet she remained a mystery. No past records beyond the essentials, no family connections that could be used to track her, no weak spots to exploit. It was as if she had erased herself from existence, and that made her even more irresistible. Damien Lancaster didn't just want Celeste anymore. He needed her, not just in his bed, not just in fleeting moments stolen in the dark, but in his life, completely, permanently. He leaned back in his office chair, exhaling slowly as he stared out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, she was moving through the streets, believing she had escaped him. She was wrong. She had started this game. But Damien Lancaster always finished what was his, and Celeste, she was his. Whether she admitted it or not, whether she fought it or not, she belonged to him. And soon enough, she would learn the truth. She could run, But he would always find her. It had been months, months of restless nights and simmering frustration, months of searching, of chasing shadows, of relentless obsession that refused to die down no matter how much Damien tried to drown himself in work. He had convinced himself that if he focused on his empire, on the deals, the acquisitions, the power plays that had always fueled him, he would eventually forget the woman who had vanished like smoke in the night. But he had been wrong. Celeste Aragon had embedded herself into his very being. He saw her in the women who failed to hold his interest, in the silence of his penthouse, in the haunting scent that had long since faded from his sheets, but remained burned into his memory. He had never been one to fixate on the past, never been the kind of man to let a single night of passion consume him. But this wasn't just about a night, this was about her, about the way she had defied him, challenged him, run from him when no one else ever had. And that was something Damien Lancaster could never accept. So when his assistant placed a file on his desk that morning, mentioning in passing that their top competitor had recently poached a highly skilled consultant, he had barely glanced at it until one name caught his eye: Celeste Aragon. The air in the room shifted. For the first time in months, a slow, dangerous smirk curved his lips. Fate, it seemed, had finally decided to play in his favor. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin as he let the moment settle in. So she had resurfaced. And not just anywhere, at a rival company. A direct challenge, a deliberate move. Was it coincidence? Or had she known he would find her? Was this her way of taunting him, of daring him to come after her? If it was, she had made a grave mistake, because now that he knew where she was, there would be no running, no disappearing acts, no escaping him. This time, Celeste Aragon was his. The next evening, Damien walked into the grand ballroom of the Carrington Hotel, the venue of the corporate gala hosted by none other than his rival firm. He hadn't originally planned on attending, but now there was no place he would rather be. Dressed in a sharply tailored black tuxedo, exuding the lethal confidence that made men fear him and women crave him, he was a force that commanded attention the moment he entered the room. But his eyes were searching for one person. And then, there she was. Celeste stood across the room, poised and composed, speaking with a group of executives. The sight of her sent a bolt of heat through his veins. She was just as he remembered, cold, stunning, untouchable. But tonight, she was different. The icy elegance remained, but there was an undeniable tension in her posture, a flicker of something in her expression that told him she felt his presence before she had even turned to see him. And when she did turn, when their eyes locked across the room, he saw it. A crack in the armor, a split-second flicker of recognition, of something dangerously close to panic before she masked it with indifference. But Damien knew better. His smirk deepened as he picked up a glass of whiskey from a passing waiter and took a slow sip, never looking away. He could see her mind racing, calculating, deciding whether to acknowledge him or pretend he wasn't there. She chose the latter. Amusement curled through him as he watched her gracefully excuse herself from the conversation and turned toward the balcony, as if she could simply walk away. Not this time, Celeste. With measured steps, he followed her, weaving through the crowd with effortless ease. The moment he stepped onto the balcony, the cool night air wrapping around them, she spoke without turning. "You shouldn't be here." Damien chuckled, low and dark. "Oh, Celeste, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you're avoiding me." She finally turned then, meeting his gaze head-on, her expression composed, but her eyes betrayed her. "Don't flatter yourself, Lancaster," she said smoothly. "This is a professional event. You don't belong here." He took a slow step closer, watching the way her breath hitched ever so slightly before she masked it. "And yet, here we are. You at a rival company, me standing in front of you after months of searching." He tilted his head, eyes gleaming with amusement. "Tell me, Celeste, were you hoping I'd find you?" She scoffed, folding her arms across her chest. "I didn't think about you at all." "Liar." Damien studied her for a long moment before exhaling a quiet laugh. "You always were a terrible liar." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't falter. "Whatever this is, it ended months ago. I suggest you move on." The sheer audacity of her words made something dark and possessive unfurl inside him. Move on? After what they had? After the way she had run? "Oh, Celeste," he murmured, stepping even closer, his voice a silken threat. "You should know by now I don't let things go." She took a step back, but the balcony railing stopped her. A flash of frustration crossed her face as she realized he had trapped her, but Damien only smiled. "Why are you here, Celeste?" he asked, his voice softer now, more dangerous. "Why work for them? Why disappear only to resurface where you knew I'd find you?" She held his gaze, but there was something in her eyes now, something fragile, something she didn't want him to see. "I don't owe you an explanation." Damien reached out then, his fingers brushing against her wrist. It was the first time he had touched her in months, and the effect was immediate. She tensed, her pulse betraying her as it quickened beneath his touch. "You do," he murmured, his voice deep and low. "Because you weren't just another night to me, Celeste. And no matter how much you lie to yourself, I wasn't just another man to you." Her breath hitched, and for a fraction of a second, just a second, he saw it, the walls trembling, the cold, impenetrable Ice Queen melting. Then she yanked her wrist away. "This conversation is over." She turned to leave, but Damien wasn't finished. "Run all you want, Celeste," he called after her, his voice calm, confident. "But we both know this isn't over." She hesitated for the briefest moment. Then, without another word, she disappeared into the crowd. Damien watched her go, his smirk returning. She could pretend all she wanted, but he had seen the way her body reacted to him, the way her breath stuttered when he was close. She wasn't as unaffected as she wanted him to believe, and now that he had found her again, he wasn't letting her go. Celeste Aragon had spent years perfecting the art of control, of keeping her emotions locked behind an icy exterior that no one, especially a man like Damien Lancaster, could penetrate. She had learned the hard way that desire was a dangerous thing, a weapon men wielded to break women down, to strip them of their power and leave them vulnerable. And she had vowed long ago that she would never be vulnerable again. But Damien was relentless. He didn't push in the obvious ways, didn't demand or force, didn't try to charm her with empty words or meaningless gifts. No, he was far more dangerous than that. He didn't seduce, he unraveled. Every glance, every smirk, every moment he stood too close yet never quite touched her was an unspoken challenge, a silent war between her will and his persistence. And it was working. She felt it in the way her pulse quickened whenever she sensed him near, in the way her breath caught when his fingers accidentally brushed hers. It infuriated her. The way her own body betrayed her, the way she couldn't seem to suppress the rush of heat that flooded through her every time she caught him watching her with that dark, knowing gaze. She had told herself it was over. That night months ago had been a mistake, a lapse in judgment that should have never happened. And yet here they were, circling each other like opposing forces, the air between them thick with tension neither of them could ignore. It started with the stolen touches. A lingering brush of fingers when he handed her a file, the accidental press of his palm against the small of her back as he guided her through a crowded room. The whisper of his breath against her ear as he leaned in too close to speak, his voice a low, deliberate caress that sent shivers down her spine. "Tell me to stop," he murmured one evening at a corporate dinner, his hand resting just a fraction too long against hers. "Tell me you don't feel it." Celeste should have. She should have pulled away, should have met his challenge with the same icy detachment she had mastered over the years. But for the first time she faltered. She looked into his eyes, those impossibly dark, unreadable eyes, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "I don't—" The words caught in her throat, weak, unconvincing. Damien's smirk deepened, but there was something else in his expression too, something softer, more patient. "You do," he countered. "You just don't want to admit it." She hated how right he was, and yet she couldn't give in. Because giving in meant surrendering, meant allowing herself to believe that he was different, that he wouldn't hurt her the way others had. It meant taking a risk, and Celeste Aragon did not take risks when it came to her heart. But Damien wasn't a man who accepted defeat. He found her again later that evening, alone on the terrace, the city lights casting a soft glow against her porcelain skin. He didn't speak right away, simply stepped beside her, his presence a quiet force that sent her nerves into chaos. "You keep running," he said after a moment, his voice quiet, thoughtful, "but we both know you don't want to." Celeste inhaled sharply, turning to face him. "You think you know me?" Damien met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I think you want me to know you. And that terrifies you." A sharp breath escaped her lips, because the truth of his words struck something deep inside her, something she had buried for years. He stepped closer then, slowly, giving her the chance to move away. She didn't. His fingers ghosted along the edge of her jaw, barely there, his touch a whisper of heat against her skin. "Tell me, Celeste," he murmured, "what are you so afraid of?" She should have lied. She should have turned and walked away like she always did. But standing there, with the city stretching behind them and the weight of his gaze pinning her in place, she found herself saying the one thing she never meant to. "You." The single word was barely audible, but it shattered the tension between them like glass. Something flashed in Damien's eyes, something raw, something unguarded. His fingers tightened ever so slightly against her skin, his thumb brushing against her cheek in the gentlest of caresses. "Then stop fighting me," he said, his voice low, coaxing. "Stop pretending you don't feel this." Her breath hitched as he leaned in. So close their lips were a mere breath apart. She could feel his warmth, the steady, controlled power of him, the unspoken promise in the way he held himself back even now, waiting for her to decide. She wanted to. God, she wanted to, but the past still clung to her like a shadow, whispering warnings she couldn't ignore, so at the very last moment she turned her face away. Damien exhaled softly, a quiet chuckle escaping him, not mocking, not frustrated, just patient. "Not yet, then," he murmured, his lips grazing the edge of her temple instead, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver down her spine. "But soon." Celeste closed her eyes as he stepped away, leaving her standing there with the ghost of his touch still burning against her skin. She didn't know what terrified her more, that he was so certain, or that deep down she already knew he was right. Celeste Aragon had not always been the Ice Queen people whispered about. There was a time when she had laughed without restraint, when she had believed in love, when she had given her heart freely without fear of it being shattered. But those days had long since died, buried beneath the wreckage of betrayal and heartbreak so profound that it had reshaped the very fabric of who she was. She had learned the hard way that love was not the beautiful, tender thing poets wrote about. It was a weapon, sharp and unforgiving, wielded by those who knew exactly where to strike. She had given her trust once, had placed her faith in a man who had sworn to cherish her, only to find herself standing in the ruins of a dream that had never truly belonged to her. Love, she had realized, was an illusion, a beautifully painted lie designed to lure the naive into a false sense of security before tearing them apart. That was why she had built her walls. why she had wrapped herself in ice so thick that no one, not even a man as relentless as Damien Lancaster, could break through. Because she knew what waited on the other side of vulnerability, pain, betrayal, devastation, and she would rather live her life alone than risk feeling that kind of agony again. But Damien wasn't like the others. He wasn't deterred by her coldness, wasn't intimidated by the sharp edges she wielded to keep people at a distance. If anything, he seemed drawn to them, as if he saw past the ice, past the armor, to the woman she had buried beneath it all, and that terrified her, because if he kept pushing, kept seeing her, she might just start to believe that love wasn't a lie, and that was a risk she wasn't sure she could take. Damien had always been a man who thrived on challenges, but Celeste Aragon was unlike any challenge he had ever faced. He could feel the weight of her past in every guarded glance, in every carefully controlled word, in every time she pulled away just when he thought he was getting close. And yet, despite all of it, he couldn't walk away. Because there was something about her, something raw, something aching, something that called to him in a way he couldn't explain. He saw it in the way her eyes darkened when she thought no one was watching, in the way her fingers trembled ever so slightly before she curled them into fists. He saw it in the way she fought against the undeniable pull between them, as if she was terrified of what might happen if she gave in. And he understood that fear, because he had his own scars. But while his past had made him ruthless, had taught him how to seize control of his own destiny, Celeste's past had made her retreat. It had made her believe that the safest way to live was to never let anyone in, and that was something he couldn't accept, because Celeste Aragon deserved more than a life spent behind walls, and he would tear them down brick by brick if he had to. The past came back to haunt her on a night she least expected. She'd been walking through the dimly lit corridors of the Lancaster Enterprises building, preparing to leave after yet another long day, when she heard it. A voice she hadn't heard in years, a voice that had once whispered promises against her skin, that had once told her she was loved, that had once belonged to the man who had broken her so completely she hadn't thought she would ever recover. Celeste. Her body went rigid, ice spreading through her veins as she slowly turned, and there he was, Adrian, the man who had taught her exactly why love was nothing more than a cruel illusion. Damien had been waiting for her in the lobby, prepared to convince her to have dinner with him despite the 1,000 excuses he knew she would throw his way. When he saw it, the moment her body stiffened, the way the color drained from her face, the barely perceptible tremble of her fingers as she clenched them into fists at her sides. And then he saw him, a man from her past, a man who, judging by the way Celeste looked at him, was responsible for the scars she so desperately tried to hide. Damien didn't hesitate. He moved toward them, his presence a quiet but undeniable force, as he placed a possessive hand against the small of Celeste's back, his thumb grazing her spine in a silent promise. "I'm here." The man, Adrian, he presumed, tensed, his gaze flicking between them before settling on Celeste. "We need to talk," he said, his voice smooth, familiar. Celeste's expression remained unreadable, her walls slamming back into place with such force that Damien almost believed she felt nothing. But he knew better. "There's nothing left to say," she replied, her voice cold, detached. "You made sure of that a long time ago." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Celeste, please, Didn't you hear her?" Damien cut in, his voice dangerously calm. "She's not interested." Adrian's gaze snapped to his, something dark flashing behind his eyes. "And who the hell are you?" Damien smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The man who won't let you hurt her again." For a moment, the tension between them was suffocating. Then, without another word, Adrian turned and walked away, leaving Celeste standing rigid, her face pale. Damien didn't speak. He simply reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, offering his silent strength. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. Celeste Aragon had spent years mastering the art of indifference, perfecting the ability to walk away before she could get hurt. But with Damien Lancaster, every carefully built wall was cracking, every defense was failing. He wasn't just persistent, he was devastating. He didn't demand, didn't chase in the way most men did. No, his pursuit was quieter, more controlled, yet infinitely more dangerous. He was patient, waiting for her to come to him, yet his presence was always felt, surrounding her like an undeniable force. And tonight, she could feel that force more than ever. She had expected another dinner, a business meeting perhaps, another one of Damien's clever tactics to get her alone, to remind her that no matter how much she resisted, the pull between them was impossible to ignore. But as she stood before the towering glass doors of the Lancaster estate, an unmistakable feeling curled in her stomach. This night was different. The doors opened before she could knock, revealing Damien in a crisp black suit, the top button undone, his dark eyes holding that quiet intensity that had haunted her since the day they met. "You came," he said, a satisfied smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "You didn't exactly give me a choice," she murmured, her tone sharp, though even she could hear the breathlessness behind her words. His gaze flickered with something unreadable as he stepped aside, allowing her in. "You always have a choice, Celeste," he said smoothly. "I just make sure you want to choose me." Her heart stuttered, but she refused to show it. Instead, she swept her gaze around the space. It wasn't the polished, formal setting she had expected. No cold dining room, no distant staff waiting in the wings. Instead, soft golden lighting bathed the room, casting warm shadows against the marble floors. A small intimate table was set near the open terrace, overlooking the glittering city skyline. The scent of something rich and intoxicating lingered in the air, blending with the subtle spice of Damien's cologne. "You went through a lot of effort," she noted, arching a brow. "Is this how you usually conduct business?" Damien let out a low chuckle, stepping behind her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. "This isn't business, Celeste." His voice was smooth, unhurried. "You know that." She did. She had known from the moment she received his invitation that this wasn't about contracts or negotiations. This was about them. About the fire they had been dancing around for months, about the unspoken promises lingering between them. And despite every warning screaming in her head, she stayed. Dinner was slow, deliberate. Every conversation laced with something more. His fingers brushed against hers when he poured her wine. His voice dipped lower when he spoke, coaxing, teasing. The tension between them thickened with each passing moment, winding tighter and tighter until it was nearly suffocating. But the moment Celeste knew she was in trouble was when he reached for her hand. It was a simple touch, his fingers sliding against hers, his thumb brushing over her palm. But it sent a current through her, a slow, burning heat that curled around her spine and refused to let go. "Come with me," he murmured, rising to his feet. She hesitated, her pulse hammering. "Damien, no more running," he interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Not tonight." And against every instinct, she let him lead her. The terrace opened into a private garden, the kind that didn't belong in a city like this. Lanterns flickered against the night sky, the scent of jasmine thick in the air. A pathway led towards Celeste, had spent years burying the past, locking away every painful memory, every scar, every moment that had once made her believe in love, only to be shattered by betrayal. She had promised herself she would never look back, that she would never allow a ghost from her past to reappear and shake the foundation she had rebuilt. But life had a cruel way of testing even the strongest of resolves. She had begun to let Damien in, allowing herself to believe just for a moment that maybe he was different, that maybe love wasn't the cage she had once thought it to be, but the past had other plans. It started with a single name, Adrian Vaughan. She heard it in whispers first, murmured through the corridors of Lancaster Enterprises. A high-profile businessman, ruthless and charming, making his way back into the elite circles after years of staying out of the limelight. A man she had once trusted, once loved. A man who had walked away from her without looking back. And now he was here. The moment she saw him, standing at the entrance of the gala, his sharp suit tailored to perfection, his expression unreadable, every wound she thought had healed tore open again. Her heart clenched, her breath catching in her throat as memories came flooding back, unbidden and unwanted. Celeste! His voice was smooth, just as she remembered, confident, possessive, as if he had a right to stand before her again. She forced herself to stay composed, masking the storm raging within her. "What are you doing here, Adrian?" He smiled, but there was something in his gaze that made her skin crawl. "Looking for you, of course." A cold dread settled in her stomach. "You lost that right a long time ago." His expression darkened, but before he could respond, another presence made itself known. "Is there a problem here?" Damien's voice was lethal, his tone calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge. He stepped beside Celeste, his stance protective, his gaze locked onto Adrian with the sharpness of a predator. Adrian let out a low chuckle, his eyes flicking between them. "Ah, so this is the infamous Damien Lancaster." He extended a hand, but Damien didn't take it. "I've heard a lot about you." Damien's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Funny, I can't say the same about you." Celeste could feel the tension crackling between them, two powerful men sizing each other up, but there was something more beneath the surface, something territorial. Adrian's gaze returned to her, his voice softening. "We need to talk, Celeste. Alone." "She doesn't," Damien cut in before she could respond. "Anything you have to say can be said right here." Adrian's jaw tensed, irritation flickering across his features. "I wasn't talking to you, Lancaster." "And yet I'm still answering," Damien countered, stepping closer. "Celeste isn't interested." The breaking point Celeste had spent her entire life building walls, ensuring that no one could ever break past the barriers she had carefully constructed. But Damien had done the impossible. He had slipped through the cracks, embedding himself in her heart, making her believe in something she had long sworn off. And now that belief was crumbling into dust before her eyes. She stood frozen in the middle of Damien's penthouse, her heart pounding so violently she thought it might shatter inside her chest. The words she had just heard echoed in her mind, cruel and unforgiving, wrapping around her like chains, tightening with every second that passed. "Damien Lancaster never wanted you, Celeste. You were just a challenge, something to conquer." The weight of the accusation settled over her, suffocating and cold. She had refused to believe it at first, had laughed at the ridiculousness of it, brushing it off as nothing more than desperate manipulation. But then the evidence came. The whispers, the hidden conversations, the way it all lined up so perfectly, painting a picture she could no longer ignore. Now, as she stood face to face with the man who had somehow become her entire world, she felt her chest tighten with something dangerously close to heartbreak. "Tell me it's not true." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the demand in her tone was unmistakable. "Tell me you didn't do this." Damien's expression darkened, his jaw tightening as he took a slow step forward. "Celeste, listen to me." "Just answer the damn question, Damien," she snapped, her voice sharp, slicing through the air like a blade. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Celeste felt the first crack in her resolve. "You told me I could trust you," she continued, her voice shaking now, raw with emotion. "You told me that you were different, that you weren't like the others." Was that all a lie? His gaze burned into hers, intense and unwavering. I never lied to you. Her chest ached. Then why does everything point to the opposite? Damien exhaled slowly, running a hand through his dark hair, his frustration evident. Because someone is trying to destroy what we have, and they're winning. She let out a bitter laugh, stepping back. You think this is about us? Damien, this is about you, about the fact that I might have been just another game to you, just another woman you wanted to break. His eyes flashed with something dangerous. Is that what you think of me? I don't know what to think anymore, she whispered, and the weight of those words nearly crushed her. Damien moved then, closing the distance between them in a single breath, his hands gripping her arms, not forcefully, but as if he was afraid she would disappear. Celeste, don't do this. Don't let them win. But she had already made up her mind. With a deep breath, she pulled away. The moment his hands fell from her skin, she felt the cold seep in, but she didn't let it show. She straightened her shoulders, tilting her chin up, her eyes flashing with the icy resolve she had relied on for years. This was a mistake, she said, each word slow and deliberate, stabbing straight into his chest. Damien's jaw clenched. You don't mean that. I do, she lied, even as her heart screamed otherwise. You and I, whatever this was, it's over. His hands fisted at his sides, his entire body rigid with tension. You're running. Her lips curled in a bitter smile. Maybe, but I've learned that running is better than standing still and waiting for the inevitable. He took a step toward her, his voice low and dangerous. And what's inevitable, Celeste? She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Heartbreak. Damien exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. Damn it, Celeste. His voice cracked, raw, with something she couldn't name. I don't care what they told you. I don't care what lies they spun. I need you to look at me and tell me, do you really believe I would ever use you? Her heart twisted painfully. She wanted to say no. She wanted to believe him, but the scars of her past ran too deep, whispering doubts into her ear, convincing her that trust was nothing but an illusion. She forced herself to hold his gaze, even as tears burned behind her eyes. I can't do this, Damien. For the first time since she had met him, she saw something crack in his expression. A flicker of something vulnerable, something almost desperate. Celeste, please. The plea in his voice nearly undid her, but she couldn't afford to break. Not now, so she turned away. She walked to the door, her steps slow and measured, each one feeling like a dagger to her own heart. Don't do this, he said again, his voice lower this time, as if he knew he was losing her. She paused at the doorway, her fingers tightening on the handle. For a brief moment, she considered turning back, giving him one last chance. But then she remembered the way betrayal felt, the way it consumed and destroyed. And so, without another word, she stepped out of the penthouse, leaving behind the only man who had ever made her believe in love again. She didn't look back. Damien Lancaster had always been a man of control, a man who dictated the terms of his life with unwavering precision. He had built his empire with ruthless ambition, crushing obstacles without hesitation. Failure was not a word in his vocabulary, and neither was surrender. But Celeste Aragon had changed everything. She had walked into his life like a storm, tearing through the carefully constructed barriers he had spent years fortifying, and then, just as swiftly, she had walked away, leaving nothing but chaos in her wake. It had been weeks since she had left him, weeks since she had looked him in the eye and told him she couldn't trust him, that whatever they had was over. He should have moved on by now. Any other woman would have been forgotten, just another fleeting presence in his world. But Celeste was different. She was the one thing he couldn't forget. the one thing he refused to lose. And for the first time in his life, Damien found himself willing to break every rule, to abandon every principle, just to get her back. The ache in his chest was unfamiliar, foreign and relentless. It gnawed at him in moments of silence, in the spaces where her voice used to be. He had spent nights staring at his phone, his fingers hovering over her number, battling the war between his pride and his desperation. And now, as he stood outside her apartment building, drenched in the city's cold night air, he realized that pride no longer mattered. He would beg if he had to. He would do whatever it took. Because living without Celeste was not an option. His driver had asked him twice if he was sure about this, if this was truly the way he wanted to handle things. Damien hadn't answered, because there was no question. This was the only way. He knew Celeste. She wouldn't be won over with flowers and empty apologies. She needed to see him, to hear him, to feel the truth in his words. And so, he waited, standing in the shadows, his heartbeat thundering in his ears, as he watched the entrance of her building, waiting for her to return. Minutes stretched into an eternity. But then, finally, she appeared. Celeste walked down the sidewalk, her long coat wrapped tightly around her, her expression unreadable. She was as breathtaking as ever, her beauty untouched by the exhaustion he knew she must be feeling. But there was something different about her tonight. A sadness lingered in her eyes, a weight she carried in her posture. And then she saw him. She stopped mid-step, her entire body going still, as if she couldn't quite believe he was there. Damien held his breath, watching the emotions flicker across her face. Shock, hesitation, something else he couldn't quite name. But she didn't turn away. That was enough for him to take his chance. "Celeste," he said, his voice rough, raw with emotion. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Damien, what are you doing here?" There was weariness in her tone, a guardedness that made his chest tighten. He took a slow step closer, careful not to spook her. "I needed to see you." She let out a bitter laugh. "You always get what you want, don't you?" He flinched at the accusation in her voice, but he didn't back down. "Not this time," he admitted. "Because what I want is you, Celeste. And I lost you." Her lips parted slightly, surprise flashing in her eyes, but she quickly masked it. "You didn't lose me, Damien. I was never yours to begin with." The words cut deeper than they should have, but he refused to accept them. "That's not true," he said, his voice low. "You were mine the moment you looked at me the way you did that night, and I was yours long before I even realized it." Her breath hitched, and for the first time he saw a crack in her icy exterior. But she shook her head, stepping back. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't go through this again." He moved before he could stop himself, closing the distance between them in an instant. "Yes, you can," he said fiercely. "Because I won't hurt you. I won't let anyone hurt you. I know you don't trust me right now, and I don't blame you, but damn it, Celeste, I love you." Damien Lancaster had never known restraint when it came to Celeste Aragon. From the moment she had stormed into his life with her cold stares and guarded heart, she had ignited something dangerous inside him, something he had never felt before. Now, as he stood before her in the dimly lit confines of her apartment, that fire blazed brighter than ever. The tension between them was unbearable, electric, a force neither of them could deny even if they tried. And God knew they had tried. But tonight, neither of them was willing to fight it anymore. Celeste's chest rose and fell rapidly, her breath shallow as she glared at him, her arms crossed as if trying to shield herself from the intensity of what was happening. But Damien saw through her defenses. He always had. "You think you can just walk in here and—" She started, but he cut her off, his voice rough with frustration. "I don't think, Celeste. I know. I know you want me just as much as I want you, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." His words were bold, raw, cutting through the air like a blade. She stiffened, her nails digging into her palms as if willing herself to resist him. "You're impossible," she muttered, turning away. But he was faster. He caught her wrist gently but firmly, pulling her back to face him. The moment their eyes met, the room seemed to shrink around them. The air grew thick with something unspoken, something neither of them could run from anymore. "Tell me you don't feel this," Damien demanded, his voice low, almost desperate. "Tell me you don't burn every time I'm near you." Celeste swallowed hard, her lips parting as if to deny it. But no words came. She hated how well he knew her, how effortlessly he unraveled her when no one else had ever managed to get close. "This isn't just about desire, Damien," she whispered. "It's about trust." He exhaled sharply, his grip tightening just enough to keep her from slipping away. "Then trust me," he said, his tone softer now, pleading. "I know I've made mistakes, but I swear to you, Celeste, I will never hurt you. I will never betray you. Just let yourself feel this. Let yourself have this." A war waged in her eyes, a battle between logic and the undeniable truth pressing against every fibre of her being. And then, just when he thought she might pull away again, she made her choice. With a sharp inhale, she grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him toward her, their mouths crashing together in a kiss that shattered every wall she had spent years building. The moment their lips met, the tension that had been building for so long erupted into something wild, uncontrollable. Damien groaned against her mouth, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Celeste melted into him, her body pressing against his, as if she had been starving for this, starving for him. Their kiss was not gentle, it was hungry, desperate, fueled by the months of denial and distance that had only made their longing more unbearable. Damien's fingers tightened in her hair as he deepened the kiss, his tongue sweeping against hers in a way that made her knees weaken. Celeste gasped when he lifted her effortlessly, pressing her against the nearest wall, her legs instinctively wrapped around his waist, her arms clinging to his shoulders as his lips trailed down her neck, his breath hot against her skin. "You drive me insane," he murmured against her throat, his voice rough with need. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" She shuddered, her fingers threading through his dark hair, tugging just enough to make him groan. "I think I have some idea," she teased breathlessly, earning her a sharp nip at her collarbone that sent a jolt of heat straight through her. But even in the haze of passion, something in her hesitated. Not because she didn't want him, she did, more than anything, but because this was more than just desire. It always had been, and that scared her. Sensing her hesitation, Damien pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his breathing just as ragged as hers. "Celeste," he murmured, his fingers brushing against her cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle given the heat between them. "If you want me to stop, say the word. I swear I will." She stared at him, her heart pounding, her body still aching for his touch. But it wasn't just about the physical connection. It was the way he was looking at her, the way he was offering himself to her, completely and without reservation. This wasn't just about surrendering to the fire between them. It was about trusting that he wouldn't let it consume her, and in that moment she finally let go of the fear holding her back. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands, her thumbs tracing the sharp angles of his jaw. "I don't want you to stop," she whispered. "I just want you." Damien's eyes darkened with something deeper than desire, something dangerously close to love, and then he kissed her again, slower this time, as if savoring the moment, as if memorizing every second of it, because he knew, just as she did, that this was not just another night of passion. This was something real. Celeste Aragon had spent her entire life running, from her past, from her pain, from anything that could shatter the carefully constructed walls she had built around herself. Love had always been a dangerous thing, a risk she wasn't willing to take. And yet, here she was, standing on the precipice of something terrifyingly real, with Damien Lancaster staring at her as if she was the only thing in his world. His eyes, dark and intense, held an emotion so raw that it made her chest tighten. He had never been a man who begged, never been the kind of person to plead for anything, but tonight she could see the silent desperation in his gaze, the unspoken plea for her to choose him. The weight of her past pressed heavily on her shoulders, the ghosts of betrayals, the echoes of heartbreak, the scars left by the people who had promised to love her, but had only destroyed her instead. Her ex-fiancé had once vowed that he would never hurt her, and yet he had shattered her without a second thought. What if Damien did the same? What if this fire between them was nothing more than another illusion, another trap waiting to close around her heart? The thought alone made her want to retreat, to disappear before she could lose herself in something she might never recover from. But Damien had never been the kind of man to let her run. "Celeste," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "Tell me what you're thinking." She swallowed hard, her arms crossing over her chest as she turned away from him, staring out of the large floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The city lights twinkled below, vast and endless, mirroring the chaos inside her. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I should do this." Damien exhaled, and she could hear the frustration in his breath. "Why? Because you're scared." She flinched at the accuracy of his words, but didn't deny them. He took a step closer, his presence looming behind her, radiating heat. But he didn't touch her. He was giving her space, giving her the choice to come to him on her own terms. "I know you've been hurt before," he continued, his voice softer now. "I know trusting someone again isn't easy for you. But damn it, Celeste, I'm not him. I'm not the man who walked away from you when you needed him the most. I'm not the one who made you believe love was something that could only break you." Her hands clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. "And what if you do?" she asked. Celeste Aragon had spent years running from the past, but tonight she stood still. There was no more room for fear, no more space for doubts. The confrontation she had avoided for so long was finally upon her, and this time she wasn't alone. Damien Lancaster stood beside her, unwavering, his presence a silent promise that he would not let her fight this battle alone. He had always been relentless in his pursuit of her, but tonight it wasn't just about desire. It was about proving that love, real love, wasn't meant to imprison her. It was meant to set her free. Across from them stood the man who had once shattered her world, Theodore Royce, the ex-fiancé who had left her with nothing but scars, smirked as if he still had power over her. But he didn't. Not anymore. The woman who had once been naive enough to believe his lies was gone. Celeste had rebuilt herself from the ashes of his betrayal, and she wasn't about to let his presence shake her. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she said, her voice cool, steady. She refused to let him see even a flicker of the emotions raging inside her. Theodore chuckled, a lazy, arrogant sound. "Come on, Celeste. You can't possibly think he's any different." He nodded toward Damien, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Men like him, men like me, we take what we want, and when we're done, we leave. Don't fool yourself into thinking this is anything more than another game to him." Celeste felt Damien stiffen beside her, but before he could speak, she placed a hand on his arm, a silent signal that she didn't need him to fight this battle for her. This was her reckoning, her moment to finally close the chapter on the pain that had ruled her life for too long. She turned back to Theodore, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "You're right about one thing," she said, her voice strong. "Men like you take and destroy. But Damien, he's nothing like you." Theodore's smirk faltered for the briefest second before he recovered. "And you really believe that?" he scoffed. "Celeste, you were always so gullible." "No!" she cut him off sharply. "I was trusting, and I trusted the wrong person, but I've learned from that mistake. I see the difference now." She stepped closer, no longer afraid of the ghost that had haunted her for so long. "Damien didn't try to own me. He didn't try to control me. He didn't break me down just to prove he could." Her voice didn't waver, her conviction solid as steel. "He fought for me, he stood by me, and you know what? That terrifies you, doesn't it?" Theodore's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence was answer enough. He had expected her to still be weak, to still be the broken woman he had left behind, but she wasn't. She had risen from that pain, stronger than he could ever comprehend. Damien finally spoke, his voice laced with quiet fury. "You don't belong here, Royce." His tone was controlled, but there was an underlying promise of destruction. "Celeste doesn't owe you a damn thing. So turn around and walk away before I make you." Theodore hesitated for only a moment before he scoffed and turned on his heel, disappearing into the night like the ghost of a past that no longer had any hold over her. Celeste exhaled slowly, the weight she had carried for so long finally lifting from her shoulders. And then she turned to Damien, the man who had fought for her even when she had pushed him away, the man who had loved her even when she hadn't known how to love herself. "I finally understand," she whispered, emotion thick in her voice. Damien frowned slightly. "Understand what?" She stepped closer, reaching for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "That your love isn't a cage," she murmured, looking up at him with eyes that no longer held fear. "It's freedom." Damien's breath caught, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something break in his carefully controlled expression. Relief. Love. Celeste Aragon had spent years shielding her heart, terrified of what love could do to her. She had believed love was a weakness, a dangerous game where the one who cared less always won. But standing here now, with Damien Lancaster holding her close, she knew how wrong she had been. Love wasn't weakness. Love was the strongest thing of all. Love had brought her to her knees, stripped her of her fears, and now love was setting her free. The moonlight poured through the grand windows of Damien's penthouse, casting a soft glow over the room. But Celeste wasn't thinking about the luxurious surroundings. All she could focus on was the man in front of her, Damien, powerful, untouchable to the world, but utterly vulnerable in front of her. She had been afraid of losing herself in him, but now she realized something beautiful. She didn't have to lose herself at all. With Damien, she could be herself. No more walls, no more fear. Damien cupped her face gently, his thumbs tracing soft circles on her cheeks as he studied her. There was something raw in his gaze, something that made her heart squeeze. "Are you sure, Celeste?" His voice was low, filled with an emotion he had never dared to show anyone else. "Because once you're mine, I'm never letting you go." A slow smile curved her lips, her fingers threading through his dark hair. "I was always yours, Damien," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "I was just too scared to admit it." His breath hitched, and then he kissed her, deep and consuming, as if he was claiming her soul. It wasn't just passion. It was love, pure and undeniable, pouring through every touch, every breath. Celeste melted against him, her body molding perfectly to his as his arms tightened around her, pulling her impossibly closer. When they finally broke apart, Damien's eyes burned into hers. "Marry me." The words were rough, unpolished, but filled with so much certainty that it took her breath away. Celeste blinked, her heart stuttering in her chest. You want to marry me?" His grip on her waist tightened. "I don't want to, Celeste. I need to. I need you to be mine in every way. I need to wake up next to you every morning, hold you every night. I need to know that you'll never walk away from me again." His voice dropped, hoarse with emotion. "You are my forever." Tears pricked her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of overwhelming love. She had spent so long thinking she wasn't capable of loving someone like this, but Damien had proved her wrong. He had shattered every doubt, every fear, until there was nothing left but him and the love she could no longer deny. "Yes," she breathed, a smile breaking across her face. "I'll marry you." Damien let out a sharp breath, as if he had been holding it in for years, and then he was lifting her into his arms, spinning her around as laughter bubbled from her lips. He kissed her again, pouring everything he felt into that moment. The wedding was an intimate yet extravagant